Hi, and welcome to the second part of Notes from the Field from the Laguna Creek Beach photo. Now, I've gone back from the field and I've gone ahead and imported all of my photos onto my computer, and you can see those all here. And I've got a whole bunch of shots. That's the problem, and the loveliness of shooting digital is that you can shoot and shoot and shoot until you've got the photo that you like, but then you have to go through and sort them all out. But I've gone ahead and gone through and I've sorted out the photos that I like the best, and I put them in here. Now you can see I've got one exposure that's right for the sky and one exposure that's right for the foreground. And the reason that I do that is because I don't have a graduated neutral density filter, and I believe that doing it this way actually gives you a lot more control over your final image, and so that's why I've got two images in here. Okay, now that I've got my final shot selected, I'm going to go ahead and open my foreground image in Nikon Capture, which is my raw converter. Okay, I just want to emphasize that these videos are not going to be software tutorials. I'm not showing you how to use Nikon Capture and Adobe Photoshop. I'm just showing you what I do in those programs to get the images that I get. So I encourage you to go to Google and search for tutorials, or send me a message if you're confused about any of the things that I do. Okay, I'm taking an overall look at the photo here, and the foreground exposure looks really good to me. And the white balance looks good as well, so I'm not going to make any adjustments to the raw file in terms of the exposure or the white balance. What I am going to do is use these color control points to adjust the tonal balance a little bit of the photo. These rocks over here on the right are a little bit dark, so I think I'm going to use a control point to go ahead and brighten those up a little bit and add the contrast back in so that it doesn't look washed out. Something like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here on the left hand side to these rocks. I want to make sure that I don't go too crazy, that I preserve the tonal relationships, so that I don't have haloing and that kind of thing. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. Now I'm also going to add a little bit of contrast to the water flow out here, just to give a little bit more punch. And that's brightening things up a little bit too much, so I'm going to pull that exposure down and shrink the size. I want to get it off there. Okay. Okay, now the other thing I want to do is pull down the brightness in the sky, so that when I make my final composite between my sea and my sky exposures, the transition is going to be a lot more smooth if I've already pulled down the level of brightness here in the sky. Obviously we can't overcome these highlights. They are totally lost. But that's okay, that's why we have the sky exposure. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. Okay, and my horizon looks pretty level, so I'm not going to adjust that. I think we're good. I'm just going to go ahead and open this now in Adobe Photoshop. Okay, that opens the image in Photoshop as a 16-bit TIFF file. My system isn't beefy enough to do a lot of 16-bit editing, especially when you get multiple layers in here. So the first thing I do is compress that down to an 8-bit file, and I just have a keyboard shortcut I set up to do that. Now, the next thing I want to do is go ahead and just get in here and clean up all these little specks that you see. There's one, there's one, there's one. And those are caused by dirt on the sensor and water spray on the front element of the lens, things like that. There's a little bit of haziness up here. So what I like to do is, generally I use the spot healing brush tool, and let's get a more appropriate brush size, something like that. And that's a really great one for cleaning up those dust spots and water specks and things like that. Okay, I've gone through with my spot healing and clone stamp brush tools and cleaned up all those little specks of dirt and water droplets and things like that. Next thing I want to do is go ahead and sharpen the image, and I'm going to selectively sharpen, which means I'm going to only sharpen things that I think need to be enhanced, like the detail in the rocks, and I'm going to leave this water alone. So how I do that is I've got an action set up for my default sharpening technique. You can see my sharpening video if you want to see more about that. Okay, so there is the result of the sharpening. Now the way I do selective sharpening is I copy that entire sharpened image, and then I go back in my history palette and I paste it on top of the image, and then I go down here to vector mask and I create a vector mask. Then what I do is I just take a brush with black, high opacity, 100% opacity, and a large size, and then I just paint out all the areas that I don't want to be sharpened, just like this. And that leaves only the detail in the rocks to be sharpened. And if I zoom in, you can see the before and after with the sharpening here. So there's with sharpening, without sharpening, with sharpening, without sharpening. Note that I'm leaving that sharpened layer as a separate layer so that I can always go back and make adjustments if I need to. Okay, I'm done with this foreground image for now, so I'm going to go ahead and go back and open up my sky image in Nikon Capture. And again, the exposure looks good, the white balance looks good, so I'm just going to use my color control points to kind of adjust the tones a little bit. And I want to go ahead and brighten up the foreground again so that the blending looks good when I go ahead and blend that final image. And definitely want to try to bring out some of the detail in this rock over here if possible, which again will just do wonders for creating a nice smooth blend. There we go. And oops, wrong one. Contrast to give it the hope it not look washed out. Alrighty, there we go. And I'm also going to add a little bit of contrast to the clouds just to help them pop a little bit. We'll be doing our final contrast adjustments using the curves tool in Photoshop, but this is a good start. There we go. Now our sky's got a little bit more pop. This is, you can see the before and the after, and over here I'm going to brighten that up just a touch as well. Come on, there we go. Okay, that looks pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and open that now in Adobe Photoshop. Okay, just like last time, it opens as a 16-bit TIFF, so the first thing I want to do is go ahead and knock that down to an 8-bit image just to save the wear and tear on my processor. Now, just as before, I'm going to go ahead and use my spot healing brush and go ahead and clean up all the little drops and image specks and things like that that show up. And my image sensor is particularly filthy, so this is going to take a while. Okay, I've got my sky all cleaned up. I don't want to sharpen the sky like I did with my foreground because clouds are not sharp. They're nice puffy objects. So I'm just going to go ahead and now copy this and paste it as a new layer on top of my foreground, just like that. Well, as you can see, all you can see, in fact, is the sky layer, and that's not what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and make another vector mask here, attach it to that sky layer, and then I'm going to use the gradient tool to go ahead and blend between the sky and the ground. And let's see if we just do something like this. Now our foreground is starting to show up, and I'm going to go ahead and play with the gradient a little bit in order to get the best blend. Okay, I've done some fiddling and I've gone ahead and got a blend that I like, that I think looks good. It's got a nice even balance of tones between the top and the bottom, a nice dynamic blend. So now it's time for the last step, which is to add curves adjustment layers to both the foreground and the sky in order to make things really pop. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is start with the sky, click the sky layer, add a curves adjustment layer, and I'll drag the highlights up a little bit and then drag the shadows down a little bit until we get to a point that we like. Let's preview that. That looks pretty good to me, so I'm going to go ahead and click off OK, and I only want that to affect the sky, so I'm going to go ahead and link that to the sky layer. Now I'll go ahead and adjust the foreground there. Again, same kind of thing, pull the highlights up a little bit. Don't want to blow anything out, but the brighter they are, the more pop it'll have. Then you pull the shadows down a little bit as well, and that really helps things pop out. There's the before and the after. I like that. It really brings out the color and the reflection here in the rocks. And it looks like it's maybe bringing things a little too hot right there, but that's okay, because what we can do, since it's an adjustment layer, is we just paint out that part. We don't want it to affect that part, and it goes back to the way it was. Okay, I'm pretty happy with the way this looks, so there's really only one thing left to do. I'm going to go ahead and flatten the image and then run noise reduction on it. And I use a plugin called Neat, which just does a great job of reducing the grain in the sea and the soft parts of the sky. I'm going to go back and fine-tune this image a little bit now, but there you have it. That's my processing flow in a nutshell. Thanks for watching the Laguna Creek Beach Notes from the Field, and here's our final image.